In 1994, a young farmer named Jean-Martin Fortier quit his office job, bought a beat-up quarter acre of rocky Quebec soil, and started growing vegetables. No tractor, no greenhouse, no outside investors. Within 5 years, he was grossing over $100,000 a year from a plot smaller than most suburban backyards. His neighbors thought he was crazy. Agricultural extension officers told him the math didn't work. University professors said you couldn't generate that kind of income without scale. He ignored all of them, and he kept meticulous records. Every seed, every bed, every dollar. And what those records revealed was something that the industrial agriculture system has spent decades making sure you never learn. That more land is not your advantage. That density is. That the most profitable farm in your county might already be sitting in your backyard, untouched, growing grass. By the time this video ends, you will understand exactly why that is. You will see the system that makes it possible, and you will know, step by step, how to build it yourself on as little as a quarter acre, starting this season. But first, you need to understand how this knowledge was buried. The story starts not in Quebec, but in Paris. 1870, the Prussian army had surrounded the city. Supply lines were cut. 2 million people were trapped inside the walls with dwindling food and no way to get more. What happened next should have changed agriculture forever. Parisian market gardeners, a class of intensive urban farmers who had been growing vegetables in the city's outskirts for centuries, turned inward. They began producing food within the city itself, using raised beds packed so tightly that their rows became famous throughout Europe. They used horse manure from the city's stables, an abundant waste product everyone else ignored, to heat their beds from below, extending their growing season deep into winter. They built cold frames from old window glass. They layered crops vertically. They harvested continuously from the same ground, replanting within hours of each harvest. By the time the siege lifted, these gardeners had developed what historians now call the French intensive method, a system so productive that a single skilled grower working 2 or 3 acres could produce enough vegetables to feed 50 families year-round. This method spread. By the 1900s, it was documented, studied, and admired across Europe. Then, a man named Alan Chadwick brought it to California in the 1960s, and for a brief moment, it caught fire in American agricultural circles. And then it stopped, because by the 1970s, American agriculture had fully committed to a different model: scale, machinery, monoculture, petrochemicals. The USDA was promoting get big or get out farming philosophy. Land-grant universities were teaching students to manage hundreds of acres with tractors, not dozens of beds with hand tools. The entire infrastructure of American food production was being rebuilt around industrial inputs: synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, fossil fuels, sold by corporations who needed farmers to stay dependent on them. A quarter-acre grower who produced $100,000 worth of food using compost and hand tools was not a customer. So the system had no interest in teaching you that model existed. The knowledge didn't disappear. It went underground. It lived in the margins, in permaculture newsletters, in obscure agricultural journals, in the practices of a handful of market farmers who were too stubborn to quit and too successful to argue with. And then the internet arrived, and the numbers became impossible to hide. In 2013, Jean-Martin Fortier published a book called The Market Gardener. It was not a philosophy book. It was a spreadsheet with soil in it. He documented exactly what he grew, on exactly how much land, and exactly what it earned. The core revelation: his operation, running on 1.5 acres, of which only a portion was in active production, was generating over 140,000 Canadian dollars per year in gross revenue, with him and his wife as the primary labor. But Fortier was not alone. Researchers studying intensive small plot farming began finding the same pattern everywhere they looked. Studies from the Rodale Institute showed that well-managed intensive beds could produce up to 8 times more food per square foot than conventional row cropping. University of California research on French intensive methods documented yields so high that farmers using the technique on a single acre we're outperforming conventional farms on 10. The math, when you actually run it, is almost uncomfortable. A quarter acre, 10,890 square feet, managed with intensive methods and planted to high-value crops, can generate between $50,000 and $100,000 in gross revenue per growing season. Not from a farm, from a backyard, from the land behind the house you already own. To put that in context, the average American beef operation generates about $400 per acre per year. Industrial corn runs about $600 per acre per year. A well-managed quarter-acre market garden operating on intensive principles can generate the equivalent of $200,000 to $400,000 per acre per year in gross revenue. The extension offices don't teach this. The seed catalogs don't headline it. Because the moment you understand these numbers, you stop being a consumer of the industrial food system and start being competition to it. But you need to understand why the system works before you build it. Conventional farming thinks in acres. Market gardening thinks in beds. A standard intensive bed is 30 inches wide and 100 feet long. You can reach the center of it from either side without stepping on the soil. That single rule, never compacting your growing surface, is the first principle that makes everything else possible. Uncompacted soil stays loose. Roots penetrate deeper. Water infiltrates faster. Microbial life thrives. Earthworm populations explode. The same square footage of loose, biologically active soil will produce more food than twice the area of compacted, tilled-to-death conventional ground. This is not opinion. It is soil science. And it means that your first investment is not seeds or tools. It is understanding that the ground itself is your factory floor, and protecting it is the most profitable decision you will make. The system has 4 interlocking components. Each one feeds the others. Component 1, the bed system. The foundation of everything is permanent raised beds. Not raised beds in the decorative sense. Planter boxes filled with potting mix. Permanent beds that you build once, never walk on, and amend every season. Mark your beds at 30 inches wide. Leave 12-inch paths between them. These paths are permanent. Lay cardboard and wood chips in them now, so you never see a weed again. Your beds get 1 treatment per season. A 2-inch layer of finished compost, worked gently into the top few inches with a broad fork. A 2-handled tool with long tines that aerates without inverting the soil. No rototilling. No deep plowing. No disruption of the fungal networks and bacterial colonies that are doing most of your fertility work for free. A quarter acre, properly laid out, gives you approximately 2,000 to 2,500 linear feet of productive growing bed. That number is your factory capacity. Everything else is about maximizing what comes out of it. Component 2, crop selection, the high-value stack. This is where most backyard growers leave money on the table. There are crops worth 50 cents a pound and crops worth $8 a pound. Growing both of them takes roughly the same labor, the same bed space, the same season, but one of them generates 16 times the revenue per square foot. The market gardener's stack focuses on what the industry calls high-turn, high-value crops. Salad mix, mesclun, arugula, spinach blends can be harvested 30 days after seeding and cut multiple times from the same planting. A single 100-foot bed of salad mix, harvested over a season, can generate $600 to $900 in direct sales. Radishes mature in 25 days. Acre turnips in 38. French breakfast radishes consistently sell at farmers markets for $3 to $4 a bunch. And a 30-inch bed, planted succession style every 2 weeks, produces bunches almost continuously from April to November. Cherry tomatoes, particularly varieties like Sun Gold, generate some of the highest per square foot returns of any vegetable in North America. Restaurants pay premium prices. Farmers market customers line up for them. A 100-foot row of trellised cherry tomatoes, managed well, can gross $400 to $700 over a season. Herbs, basil, cilantro, dill, chives, are perhaps the most underrated cash crops in the entire system. The markup between what an herb costs to grow and what it sells for at market is extraordinary. A flat of basil seedlings that cost $4 in seed, and labor sells wholesale for $40, and at retail for $80. Restaurants will pay $15 for a pound of fresh basil every single week, all season long. The discipline of the market gardener is this: every bed must justify its space. If a crop is not generating at minimum $5 to $6 per linear foot over the season, it does not earn a spot in your system. This is not ruthlessness. It is the difference between a garden and a business. Component 3. Succession planting. The harvest engine. A single planting of lettuce is a garden. Succession planting every 10 days for 6 months is a business. The concept is simple, and the execution transforms your quarter acre from a seasonal spike of abundance into a consistent weekly harvest engine. Every 10 days, you seed another flat of whatever is selling. Every 10 days, a new section of bed gets transplanted. You are not growing one crop. You are growing a conveyor belt of crops, staggered so that something reaches harvest maturity every single week from April through November. This is the mechanic that makes the income numbers real. You cannot show up to a farmer's market once with 200 heads of lettuce. You can show up every Saturday with 50 heads of lettuce, 30 bunches of radishes, 20 pints of cherry tomatoes, and a dozen bundles of herbs, week after week after week, and build a customer base that depends on you. Chefs building menus around your produce. CSA subscribers who pay you in February for a season that hasn't started yet. That is cash flow in your account before you've planted a single seed, which is a financial structure that almost no other small business model can offer you. Component 4. The fertility loop. Here is what makes this system regenerative rather than extractive. Every intensive bed you harvest from is removing nutrients from the soil. The conventional solution is to spray synthetic fertilizer, buy inputs, deplete the land, buy more inputs, an endless dependency cycle. The market gardening solution is a compost system that closes the loop. Every kitchen scrap, every spent crop, every chicken or duck tractor run over finished beds. All of it feeds a compost pile. That pile, turned correctly, reaches temperatures hot enough to kill pathogens and weed seeds. In 90 days, your waste becomes the 2-inch amendment that goes back onto your beds. Add a small flock of laying hens rotated through finished beds in a portable tractor, and you add another layer to the loop. Chickens scratch and fertilize. They eat pest insects and weed seeds. Their manure, composted or aged, is among the highest nitrogen amendments available. 3 hens on rotation will handle more fertility work per square foot than most people realize, and they'll also provide eggs, which are a second revenue stream from the same quarter acre. The system, at maturity, costs almost nothing to run. Seeds, your labor, the infrastructure you built in year 1. That is it. The fertility generates itself. The investment to build this is not what you think. A basic quarter-acre market garden setup, broad fork, wheel hoe, seedling trays, heat mats, a simple low tunnel kit for season extension, and starting seeds, runs between $800 and $1,500, depending on what you already own. A small greenhouse or high tunnel, which extends your season by 6 to 8 weeks on each end, adds another $500 to $2,000, depending on size and whether you build it yourself. This is a business you can capitalize for under $3,000. Most small businesses fail before they make $3,000. This one, in its first full season, can return it 10 times over. Here is the sequence. Month 1, map your quarter acre. Identify the sunniest, flattest section. You need a minimum of 6 hours of direct sun. 8 is better. Mark your permanent beds. Smother the grass with cardboard overlapped 6 inches at the seams. Pile 4 to 6 inches of wood chips on the paths. Order compost. Month 2. Lay your first compost layer. Build your first beds. Set up your seed starting station indoors. A shelf, some LED grow lights on a timer. Seedling trays. Start your first successions of lettuce, spinach, and brassicas. Month 3. Transplant your first seedlings. Direct seed radishes and arugula. Begin your compost pile. Research your local farmer's market. Visit it. Learn what's selling. Talk to vendors. Identify what's missing from the tables. Month 4 to 6. Harvest begins. Your first radishes come out in 25 days. Your first salad mix in 30. You are not selling your entire harvest yet. You are learning your system, tasting your crops, understanding your land. Month 6 to 12. You know your beds. You know your crops. You have a handle on your succession timing. Now you apply to your farmer's market. Reach out to 2 or 3 local restaurants and launch a small CSA with 10 to 20 subscribers. You are not trying to generate $100,000 in year 1. You are building the machine that will, year 2 and beyond. The system compounds. Your soil improves every season. Your customer base grows. Your succession timing tightens. Your per-bed productivity increases as your soil biology matures. This is not a get-rich-quick scheme. It is a system that gets more valuable every year you run it, on land you already own. Most guides stop before the uncomfortable parts. Let me cover 3 of them. The first is labor. This system requires real work, particularly in the first 2 years while you're building your soil and learning your successions. Market gardening is physical. You will spend mornings on your knees. You will harvest in the heat. You will carry heavy crates. If that is not the life you want, this system is not for you. But if you are someone who would rather build something real on your own land than sit in traffic for 2 hours a day, the math is radically in your favor. The second is markets. The system generates income only when you have someone to sell to. Farmers markets take a percentage and require consistent attendance. Restaurant accounts require reliability and volume. CSA subscribers require trust. Building these relationships takes a season or 2. You will not show up in April with radishes and walk home with $10,000. You will show up in April, introduce yourself, and begin earning the trust that turns into a waiting list by year 3. The third is scale. A quarter acre can absolutely generate $50,000 to $100,000 gross. But gross is not net. Seeds, amendments, packaging, market fees, occasional equipment replacement, these costs are manageable but real. Budget 25 to 35% of gross revenue as operating costs in your first few years. Your net on a well-run quarter acre is still extraordinary by any agricultural standard. Just go in with honest numbers. The French market gardeners who fed Paris during a siege were not farmers in the industrial sense. They were systems thinkers. They had looked at waste and seen fertility. They had looked at small spaces and seen density. They had looked at dependency on far-off supply chains and decided, quietly, to build something different. Jean-Martin Fortier, on his rocky Quebec plot, was doing the same thing. He was not trying to compete with industrial agriculture on its terms. He was playing a completely different game, one where his advantages were intimacy, flexibility, quality, and direct relationships with the people eating his food. Those advantages do not go away. They compound. 10 years from now, industrial food prices will be higher. Supply chains will be more fragile. The cheap food illusion will be harder to maintain as fuel costs, input costs, and transportation costs rise. Your neighbors will feel that pressure in every grocery receipt. And you will walk out to your quarter acre. In the early morning, pull the first radishes of the season. Harvest a basket of salad mix, still cold with dew, and walk back inside to fill orders for people who have been waiting all winter for exactly what you just grew. That is sovereignty, not the loud kind that argues with systems, the quiet kind that stopped needing them. The knowledge is not complicated. The biology is not mysterious. The investment is within reach of almost anyone who owns or has access to a quarter acre of ground. Fanley documented his fish pond method 2,500 years ago, so the knowledge wouldn't be lost. The Parisian market gardeners documented theirs, so the siege of 1870 wouldn't be forgotten. Jean-Martin Fortier documented his, so you wouldn't have to figure it out from scratch. You have the information. The question is whether you use it. The beds are waiting. If this opens something for you, if you can see yourself walking out to that quarter acre in 10 years and knowing exactly what you built, subscribe so you don't miss the next system we uncover. Share this with someone who's ready to stop asking permission. The knowledge is here. The choice is yours.